with more definition to dive a little deeper into the code we've just written. Now, we are going to explain, okay, what we have written here. First of all, let's look at comment, okay? And just like its name means, it is just about a comment or description we give to a piece of code or statement we've written. Now, when you look over here, what you see here, they are comments, okay? This is just to describe the program that we have written. The file is main, author is Evans, created on this. This is just comment. There are two ways you can do that. You can just use this. This is a block comment, and then this is a line comment. This gives you a line comment. So whatever, if you type in and then you go down here, and then you type in it, and it will not be seen as a comment. Now, they just describe the code that we have written. So we have a program to calculate parameters, so it tells you about the program. Here we're declaring variables. Here we're calculating the perimeter of the rectangle, and here the area of the rectangle. Now, these are comments, and these comments are not processed by the compiler. In other words, they are not translated, but it doesn't even see, or it is not part of the program itself. It's actually for the other developers to be able to read and understand the program that you have written. And it is actually a good practice to comment your code. I mean, imagine if you've written a program with more than 5,000 lines of code and more than 100 files. Yes, you can actually do that. It's quite easy to remember what the program is about, but how about in future when you have to make changes or update the program? I bet you have to go through the entire program to make those changes, believe me. So it's actually a good thing. Next I'd like to talk about is functions. Yeah, functions. Just like the name means, literally what it means, function. When you ask you what is the function of a doctor, you're going to tell me the things doctors do. Exactly. That is what function is about. Now in program, okay, in programming language, functions are a group of statements with a given name that returns an output. So let's just say that you're going to have different functions to do, maybe to write a simple calculator. So first of all, the addition part of the calculator can be grouped into function, so that we know that this function, what it does is to sum the numbers the user will enter in the program. Now, you group functions to produce or to give out an output. These statements that you will group may work logically together to produce one output. When you see that, you calculate, you add them into a function. And an example in the code here is this from line 22, which is int main. This is the main function that is run by the compiler. This is what we refer to as the main function. Don't worry, we'll go into details when we go into function, but just know this, that when we run the main function, we'll be able to output our program. When we go further into details, we'll be writing more functions, and then this function will be performing more specific things. And we'll learn how to define those functions by ourselves. Special symbols. If you notice, or if you observe the code, we had simple, smaller symbols within our code, such as the semicolon, like this one. It's a special symbol. And the most annoying thing is sometimes when you misplace some of these, they generate errors. Some of them generate errors. Some of them, they make your program run, and then the result that you get is not that result that you expect. Yes. So those simple, small part, we call them special symbols. You see more of them as we move on. Then we have reserved words. You can think about reserved words to be words that have been reserved within the C++ programming language. You know that when we were writing our programs, okay, we were able to say width, we were able to declare a variable here as width, and then we gave it a variable, a value of 14. But there are words that have been reserved, and therefore you can't use those words to define something different. In other words, let's say that you wanted to name the width int instead. You can't do that. You can't use this as the name of the variable that you are actually declaring. Or you can't say that declaring a variable and I'm going to call it this, or I'm going to call it namespace. It doesn't happen. And so therefore, a good IDE will let you know those reserved words. You see them in blue color code. In another language, you see them in different color code. These are reserved words. You use them, but you cannot name your functions or your code with those names. The next thing I'll talk about is identifiers. Identifiers, these are names that we give to part of our program to identify these statements that we write. For instance, in our code, we gave this variable length, okay? This is what we wrote. We can write anything at all, but we gave it length. This is an identifier. If we probably learn how to, when we learn how to write a function, and then you give a function a name, that name is an identifier, which is identifying the function that you have written. And in C++, okay, a valid identifier is a sequence of one or more letters, digits, or underlined symbol, which is the underscore, okay? The length of an identifier is not limited, so there are rules. So we can go, and they are not limited, so you can have as many, the length, you can probably, depending on the name that you want to give it. Maybe here you wanted to say int result underscore of perimeter, okay, maybe equals to something 0. Now you can't also have space for identifier. This will yield an error. It's already underlining it. It will be an error. It can't. And then you can't also use marked letters. There are certain symbols you cannot use them as part of an identifier. And only letters, digits, and underlying characters are valid. And in addition, identifiers or variable identifiers should always begin with a letter, although they can also begin with an underscore character, but this is usually reserved for external links. If you open certain external links, they'll tell you, see this underscore. So if you're trying to name your variables this way, another developer might think they are actually external variables. Yeah. So for instance, you could actually do something like this. It is correct. Yes, you can do something like this. It's correct. Now, one thing you should have in mind, probably you're thinking, in no way you should begin, an identifier with a digit. It can include a digit, but you should not begin it with a digit. These are the rules for naming your variable or identifying your variable. First of all, you can include numbers. You should include numbers or digits, letters, an underscore. You can begin with an underscore or a letter, but you should not begin with a digit. You can have the size, the length of the name of the identifier is not limited within your program. You can have as long as you want, if only makes sense to you. So long as it makes sense to you. Now, the last thing here is white space. Where are you going to see a white space? Well, white space, these are the blank space, tabs, and new lines that we have in our program. This is a white space. This one is a white space. This one is a white space. Now, when you print this, let's say you print this on a white sheet, you won't see these these spaces are on the paper. These are what we refer to as white space, literally as white space.